Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We're going to be talking with Mark today. Uh, we're really excited about this. We're going to be talking about security and auditing, segregation of duties. This is important for everybody, I know. We're going to get started right away here. One quick order of business before we do. We are recording this webinar just like we record all of our webinars. So you can find this webinar later this afternoon on our website. That's innovia.com. And of course, if you have any questions, just type them into that question box. I will call them out and get them answered. So Mark from Fastpath, take it away, my man.
Thank you, Abby. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good day out there. We're talking about segregation of duties. It's not just for big companies today. This is really how a lot of people decide that they want to approach security and risk management in their system. Somewhere along the way, something happens and they end up with this perception that there's a risk. They do some risk analysis, and in the end, other things take precedent and they end up not doing much of anything, or they do a few things and just hope that their security risks will go away. But it really is a big deal, and it really is an important piece. Sorry, let me get my technical piece here. And it's important because we do live in an insecure world. It's not hard to pick up the phone or pick up your phone or your computer or whatever and be able to look at Google and just see story after story after story of companies that have had significant issues. In some cases, it's fraud. In other cases, it's just significant misstatements. And it becomes pretty painful. Hopefully your company is not like this one, where an accountant worked one day and managed to embezzle $15,000. Clearly I'm doing something wrong because I've not embezzled anything, and I've worked way more than one day. But in this case, they hired their accountant off of Craigslist, which might be especially for smaller organizations, just a big red flag. I wouldn't go hunting for your accountants on Craigslist. But the idea here today is we really just kind of want to have a conversation. So as we go through this, if you've got questions, just put them in the question box. We'll stop in the middle. We'll tackle them. We're not going to go at a blistering pace or anything like that. We're really just going to explore some things that can go on in small organizations around segregation of duties. And I just have a really kind of personal story to start with. My sister is dating an attorney. He's a one-man shop who specializes primarily in criminal defense, but he does some other things as well. And he's one guy, got a couple of employees, that's about it. And about 6 weeks ago, someone called him up and said, I was expecting a settlement check of about $20,000 and I haven't seen it. He said, no problem, I'll check with my assistant. I'm sure it's just an oversight. We'll get the check to you right away. And he went and checked his bank accounts, and all of his operating and escrow accounts, so all of the money he was holding, not just for himself, but for all of his clients, were completely wiped out and empty. His assistant had access to his bank accounts and taken off with everything. So that's about as small a business as you can get, one guy with a couple of employees, and yet he still had some pretty significant segregation of duties failures there. And so he's still digging his way out of that. You are not too small to need segregation of duties. The trick is figuring out how to make them work in smaller organizations. A couple of early thoughts. Smaller businesses may actually have a higher risk of fraud because they tend not to have the same level of controls in place, because they have fewer people. In some cases, especially small growing organizations, which I've been a part of, the focus is really on that growth and that next thing, not necessarily building out the infrastructure behind it to ensure that everything is safe and secure. Smaller organizations may also have a harder time with segregation of duties. They just have fewer people to split the duties up between, and it doesn't make sense to hire people just to split up AP, for example. And then there can be lots of other factors. I've worked with organizations that are full of family members, and so there are all kinds of other dynamics going on beyond just the employer-employee relationship. There can be all kinds of family concerns and underlying issues along the way that can contribute to a fraud risk inside of a family. That I deserve something I'm not getting attitude that we see a lot in fraud cases. Long-time employees can be an issue. They get treated like family, and again, that I've helped build this business and I'm not getting what I deserve attitude is a really tough one to kind of hunt down and fight when you're dealing with smaller organizations. Sometimes smaller companies have outdated processes. The company has really just grown beyond the process. As the company grows and accelerates and gets bigger and faster, folks are just trying to keep up, and that can leave holes in what people are allowed to do and permissions and those types of things. And then just not enough employees or not having the right employee in the job. Someone was promoted from maybe they were very good at an entry-level job, and as they've kind of been promoted, they've been moved beyond their skill level, and that can create some problems with segregation of duties as well. So the first step, my advice for smaller organizations is first fix the stupid stuff. And that's just, there are certain basics that you just need to kind of take a deep breath, call a timeout, and tackle. These aren't even necessarily, some of them are ERP related, some of them are not. But background checks for employees, they're not particularly expensive. There are some limits as to what you can do depending on what job you're hiring for and what country that you're in, but any type of background checks you can do for employees just to ensure that you're not hiring that felon who just got out of jail serving 10 years for embezzling from their last company, those types of things. Do everything you can to avoid power users in your ERP system, to avoid power users in Nav. It opens an awful lot of doors, and you definitely want to avoid everyone in a power user type role. There's really not a reason for it. Nav has great security. I know it's some work to get it set up, but that default of we're just going to give everybody everything and hope it all turns out is really not the right approach. It's the equivalent of basically leaving your front door open and putting a sign on the lawn saying, come in and take what you want. This is kind of a weird one, mandatory vacations. What studies have found is in the accounting world in particular, folks who never take vacations represent a risk. By forcing people to take vacations and putting someone else in that job for a week or 2 weeks, you're effectively doing a segregation of duties process, even if it's only for a really short period of time. This is really important. I can't tell you the number of cases where a fraud has been discovered because someone went on vacation and the person who did the job for that week or 2 weeks asked the right set of questions. So if your accountants are not taking vacations, you need to force them to. I know that sounds silly, but there's lots and lots of evidence to suggest that this is actually a pretty good fraud control. In smaller companies, review the financial statements. You got to be looking at those every month. You have to be looking for oddball things. To wrap a couple of these all up in one story, a number of years ago, some friends of the family had a car dealership. They had a longtime employee who never took vacations. They treated her like a member of the family, and yet they could never figure out why, despite being a very successful car dealership, they never really made any money. They were always like right on the edge. And the reason was that she'd been funding a multi-million-dollar lifestyle with their money for a number of years. So again, this was not a particularly big organization. It was a family-run car dealership. Again, basics, lock stuff up and don't give everyone a key. if you have pre-printed check stock, lock it up. Keep an eye on it. If you have signature stamps or any of those basic types of things, you want to lock those pieces up. You want to restrict access to whatever you reasonably can, and don't give everyone a key. So tackling the basics does a couple of things. It sends a message that you're at least paying attention, which by itself can serve as a deterrent for someone who is opportunistic. If it's just someone who wants to empty the petty cash box, proving that you're on top of that, that it's locked up, that it's put away, removes those opportunities for the little things and tells everybody that you're trying to be vigilant with what you're doing. It doesn't mean that someone won't figure out a more complicated scheme, but let's deal with the small things first. We're less worried about a Mission Impossible style assault on our house where Tom Cruise comes down from the roof. The reality is that's probably going to take an awful lot of work and probably isn't going to happen to you. But if you walk around leaving all the doors and windows in your house unlocked and open, there's a decent chance someone might wander in and take something. So tackle the basics. I'm just going to hang out there for a minute. Abby, do we have any questions so far from folks?
So far, no questions, Mark.
All right. Well, we will move into some segregation of duties stuff, but if we hit some stuff here that has questions, folks, just jump on in. When it comes to segregation of duties for organizations, what you really need to do is take a risk-based approach. Step back, take a look at your organization, try to be dispassionate and say, where are the areas where we really have some higher risks? For most organizations, the cash cycle, and that is everything from sales all the way into cash and payables, cash going out the door, you really want to take a good hard look at those processes. We want to start with items, again, the most obvious items. We want to take a risk-based approach. So from a bank control item, are you controlling access? Have you limited signature? Using dual signatures or those types of things to get some additional control and ensure that people aren't emptying your bank account. In terms of receiving cash, at a minimum, try to separate the recording of deposits and the receipt and actual delivery of deposits. There are all kinds of great tools now, technology tools that can kind of help with these. Including things like check scanners, which will let you make that deposit from your desk. It doesn't necessarily have to be an accountant who is doing that. It can be someone who is typically outside of the cash cycle. In smaller organizations, it can be an owner or someone like that. But I have seen actually fairly good size organizations where someone took the cash bag, intending to put it in the bank night drop, and then they switched cars with their spouse, left the bank bag in the car over the weekend, and by Tuesday it still had not been deposited. So you really want to make sure that you've got control of those types of things, and technology like electronic check scanners and things like that that can do deposits without having to physically take the checks can also really be your friend there. When you're dispersing cash, really want to maintain control of vendors and amounts and authorizations. And I realize that there's a lot here in order to be able to segregate. One thing that you can do in smaller organizations is do things like put an audit trail on vendor additions and changes and then review that before checks are cut. So understand, why are new vendors being created? Do we have support for that vendor? Is it real, or is it someone's fake company that they're trying to put through? Tools like that can really serve as a double check. Hey, we're going to check everything we can to make sure these vendors and invoices are valid before we authorize checks this week. And then one that small companies miss sometimes, small organizations, are refunds. If folks are able to create fake customers, then it is possible to refund essentially their entire family money that was never ever paid in. So that is something that you want to pay attention to. The cash cycle from a risk-based standpoint is typically where you want to start. Most organizations have significant risk in one or more of these areas, and some companies honestly are really, really good at this because they get that. They get the cash side. But this is really an area where you want to pay attention, and I'll have some specific recommendations in a couple of minutes here too. After cash, inventory tends to be an item for a lot of companies. A firm I worked for, we had lots of inventory items: screws, bolts, nails, metal rods. Nobody wanted any of that, but we also had a giant pile of hard drives. Those things could easily walk out the door, and folks could make a little money selling a small portable hard drive. So we put our inventory focus in terms of control onto those items that we were really worried could walk out the door. If someone stole a handful of screws, frankly, we just didn't care. It wasn't relative to the business, and nobody wanted the metal pipe in a funny shape for specifically what we did. So we took a risk-based approach there as well, and we really focused on the items that we were concerned either could easily be sold or traded for something of value out the door. And then you also want to keep an eye on your assets. This is pretty straightforward. Most people get this, but it is an important thing to do. It's pretty burdensome for most firms, large or small, honestly, to do a full fixed asset count on any kind of regular basis. I've been involved in a few, and it can be difficult. But again, if you pick the high dollar items and the more mobile items and just focus on maintaining control of those, that will go a long way toward keeping the rest of your assets in check. Desks and chairs rarely walk away very far. I had a company I was working with, though, they started to do a fixed asset count and realized they were missing half a dozen trucks in their Mexican subsidiary, just vehicles, pickup trucks that were just completely gone. Nobody could find them. Nobody knew where they were. That was a little bit of money in their case. If at all possible, spend some time understanding your processes and building job descriptions for folks. I realize that many small organizations are running really fast, but if you can take a time out and be able to understand what it is people are actually doing, it's often possible to insert some type of review or segregation of duty into that process to give you some peace of mind that yes, there actually is a process going on here in terms of segregation of duties. All right. A couple of thoughts in terms of controls and mitigations. So if we just get to the point where we're just truly not able to assign items to enough people, there are a couple of options that can help you. One is obviously you can add employees. We probably all agree that that's not ideal. We don't want to add employees just for the purpose of segregation of duties. But if you are having to add employees for other things, you might be able to slide them into some of the segregation of duties pieces, as long as they understand what they're doing. If they're simply rubber stamping what someone else has done, then they're not actually providing an adequate control. So you do have to be a little careful of bringing people in from other departments or other areas. If they don't understand what they're doing, then they're truly not functioning as a control. Job rotation can be helpful if you've got a couple of people who do different jobs and you're able to swap them around maybe every 6 months. Then it makes it a whole lot tougher for people to be able to do something improper. It also gives you some additional control around your business, because you're able to say, hey, I have two people who can each do each other's jobs, so if someone goes on vacation, we have coverage. If I lose someone, either they find another job or they go on some type of leave, then I know that I've got coverage there too. So job rotation can be an interesting way to really get some level of segregation of duties control also. For reconciliations, so whether this is a bank reconciliation, a credit card, a review of balances, speed is your friend. The faster that you can do those, the more likely you are to find something that is incorrect or improper in those. Credit cards are an area with lots and lots of issues. I've seen more than one case where a controller is reconciling everyone's credit card, including their own, and there's no review, and there have been fraud in those particular cases. So really anything you can do to speed up your reconciliations, if you can do daily bank reconciliations, that's fantastic. If you can get more regular credit card reconciliations, again, really, really important pieces there. A couple of additional thoughts around this. Positive pay is a really nice control. It's nice because there's an external component to that. With positive pay, you're saying these are the payments that I've created. We've sent them to the bank, and we have told the bank these are all the payments I've sent, and these are the amounts and the people. So if someone tries to change the amount on a check and pass it through, it's going to get rejected by the bank. It really gives you some additional, or if someone creates a check, gets a hold of check stock, creates a check, and it's not in the positive pay file, then the bank is going to come back to you before they will honor that check. So positive pay is a really nice external control. It's a segregation of duties type of control that you're not having to do inside your organization. Same type of thing with wire confirmations. A lot of the banks will, some of them even require that someone will call you back in terms of a wire. So if you go and place a wire, someone from the bank calls back a specific set of people, and you can make that the person who did not place the wire. So if a CFO is placing the wire, then they're calling the CEO or the owner to confirm that wire. Again, really nice external confirmation, especially because it's possible to move a large amount of money in a very short amount of time with wire transfers. Don't sign checks made out to cash. This should be pretty obvious to most folks. That's an easy way for folks to change the amount and line their pocket that way. I would also urge you to avoid acronyms. I worked for a company for a while whose acronym was CISI, and we would get lots of checks in labeled as CISI. The company name was fairly long, so people would abbreviate it. And we had an employee who got a hold of some of those incoming checks and turned CISI into CASH and foolishly went down and signed their name on the back of it and cashed it. So as soon as it came through, we knew who had done it, but you have to think a little cleverly. If I were going to steal from myself, what would I do to find those types of things? And then one more option that sometimes gets overlooked. If your accountant or CPA is responsive, they can be a really good mechanism for some segregation of duties items in smaller organizations. So if, for example, you have a conversation with your outside accountant, and say, look, as the owner, I don't have time to do bank reconciliations, but I need to get them done in a timely manner. They're available on the web on this day. If we can make them available to you they're available on the 30th. If we can make them available to you and you can commit to get reconciliations to me by the 3rd, I'm willing to pay some money to make that happen. Assuming that they're responsive and can get you a reconciliation in a relatively short period of time, that becomes a great external control, because your bank reconciliations or your credit card reconciliations are being done by someone outside the organization who is trained to be skeptical. They don't know enough about the organization, so they're going to ask those dumb questions that lead to really important information. The only caveat here is, in my experience, a lot of accountants, a lot of CPAs, chartered accountants, I'm a CPA, so I will take some of the flack for this. They're not particularly responsive. They can be slow. So part of that conversation, part of that contract would be a response time. you want these items reconciled, or you want a reconciliation back within a couple of days, not 60 days later, because that's not helpful. All right, I've been talking a lot. Let me pause and see, do we have any questions from folks?
Mark, you must be explaining things so well. I don't have any questions.
All right. So while we're doing this, it doesn't have to be questions too. If folks have some segregation of duties or control points that you've kind of stumbled across that you like, just go ahead and throw those in there too, and we'll be able to toss them out as ideas when we get to the end here. All right, so above all, what folks really need to do is, in smaller organizations, you have got to be skeptical. The challenge with smaller organizations is that everyone is your friend. They feel like family. They feel like people who you have worked next to. You have late nights, long hours, all of those types of things. These people would never steal from me. And the reality is, they would never overtly steal from you. If you ask them, they would tell you they would never steal from you. It's not, but in a lot of cases, it becomes one of those, it's a small creeping set of I deserve more, is what leads to this. In a lot of cases, we see folks do something very small, and they get away with it because there's a hole in the segregation of duties. So they do it again and again, and the numbers just keep getting larger. And in some cases, this is not even always related to fraud or misstatements or other kinds of problems. It was not with NAV, but I have seen a case with another ERP system where someone was given complete power user access inappropriately. The system was behaving very, very slowly, and so they were hitting a bunch of buttons trying to get the system to respond. And in that process, they managed to select a combination of menu items that wiped out the accounts receivable table. So the fact that they had so much access, they were not doing anything inappropriate. They weren't trying to steal. They were simply trying to get their system to respond. But because they had too much access, they actually blew away all of accounts receivable. Fortunately, they had a printed copy from about a week before that, and their backups were no good. They actually ended up having to go back and try to rebuild it from their printed copies. So this is not necessarily always about fraud or people stealing from you. It's really about getting control of your business to help reduce or eliminate some of those really negative surprises that can come up and come along here. So I'm really, I was kind of hoping that some folks would have some other ideas or other thoughts that they have going on. The challenge is that in many cases, folks can be really, really creative. So what you've got to do is take that risk-based approach and start with things like cash or inventory or assets. And then once you feel like you've got a good handle on that, then move to the next set of risks and move to the next set of risks. And this may take a lot of time, but if you're really tackling those highest risks first, then you'll get about 80% of the coverage that you would ultimately like to have. And then with each step, you get a little bit more and a little bit more. We never have a perfect control environment, but we can go from a really poor one to a really good one with just a little bit of work. All right. Just to give you a little bit of what we do at Fastpath, we have a set of tools really all around helping companies understand and manage security, mitigation, segregation of duties, all of those types of things. So our Assure platform really around security access review and segregation of duties. So in the case of NAV, we have a custom rule set. We pull the security out of NAV. We're able to apply that against segregation of duties and show you where your conflicts are, where folks have access to things that might create a segregation of duties conflict for you. And then that gives you the option to be able to either build a mitigation, adjust security, change your process, that type of thing. But until you know what your conflicts are, it can be tough to really do that. Audit Trail does continuous monitoring. So if you want to see changes that are being done to your vendors or to customers, cash, bank accounts, all of that, Audit Trail is designed to capture that, including showing the original amount and the new amount, who made the change and when. Even better, this all gets shown in a really nice set of reports, so you're not having to go dig through NAV to figure out kind of what happened. Not only do we grab it all, we've got a really nice reporting engine on top of it. And then Audit Trail works together with Audit View so that we can actually send out all of those reports, whether those are segregation of duty conflicts or Audit Trail things. You can get those delivered in your inbox. And we have a related Outlook add-in. So if you're using Outlook, when those items show up in your inbox, you can review them and actually electronically sign them from there. And then Identity Manager and Config AD work together to be able to provision new employees. The idea is that someone can say, hey, this is an employee. They're going to be new. This is the access they need to have in NAV. We're going to send out a request. Someone can review that and approve it. And then that can actually be set up at your option automatically inside of NAV once everything is approved. So it's really around getting better control and easing that new employee setup. So that's what we do. Those are kind of my thoughts around segregation of duties and some ideas of what you can do from a smaller company perspective. So if we've got any more questions, let's open it up and see what comes up.
You know, Mark, we have a quiet group today. I haven't had any questions, haven't had any comments yet. Just to give people a minute to type in any questions and comments they have, a reminder that we have recorded this session. So if you want to view it later, or if you want someone from your organization to be able to view it, just go to our website, which is innovia.com, and it'll be there. And Mark, no questions, no comments.
All right. Well, if folks would like to not do proper segregation of duties and maybe open up their whole organization, give people access to checkbooks and credit cards and things, my information is here. So go ahead and send me that information so that I can hop on and clean out your bank account and we can all have a little party together. But other than that, I'm hoping that folks take some of this to heart and really kind of work to get some better controls over their organizations.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was really some good information across the board, NAV or not.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity, Abby. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we hope to see you again at our next webinar.